Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to sink deeper into your pillow, breathe slowly, and drift into a story that might make you shiver, or at least appreciate your cozy blanket a little more. Imagine for a moment that you've been transported far back into the cold stone belly of a medieval castle. The walls echo with whispers and the air smells of soot, old straw, and secrets. The moon hangs pale over jagged battlements. You step across the courtyard, your feet crunching on frozen mud mixed with bits of hay and the odd scrap of refuse. A guard in a rusty helmet eyes you suspiciously. You're not supposed to be here, but tonight, we'll pretend. As you push open the heavy oak door, a gust of damp air swallows you. Inside, the great hall flickers with torchlight, each flame dancing shadows across the high, arched ceiling. You think of castles as grand and regal, but the first thing you notice is the smell, like wet dog, moldy cheese, and unwashed bodies all stewing together in a single cauldron. You might expect roaring fireplaces and feasts worthy of King Arthur. In truth, you'd find a few crusts of coarse bread, boiled cabbage that's gone slightly sour, and perhaps a scrap of salted pork if you're lucky. The servants shuffle past you, eyes lowered. Their skin is chapped and red, their nails blackened by endless labor. You watch a young scullery maid carry a bucket of greasy dishwater, splashing it onto the already filthy floor. She doesn't look up. Her shoulders sag beneath a linen shift, and her feet are wrapped in rags. No shoes tonight, or most nights. Beyond the hall, you'd find drafty chambers lined with thin rushes on the floor. These rushes aren't just to keep you warm, they're also meant to soak up spilled ale, vomit, and the occasional rodent droppings. Replaced maybe once a month, if at all. You might hope for a warm bed, but in most cases, you'd sleep on a lumpy sack stuffed with straw, shared with fleas and sometimes another person or two. Privacy? That's a concept for future centuries. Every hour or so, a guard trudges past, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. He's half asleep, his breath clouding in the icy air. He clutches a spear, but the real danger tonight isn't an invading army. It's the biting cold that gnaws at your fingers and toes, and the rats that skitter across the floorboards in search of crumbs or, worse, your exposed skin. You listen to the low moans of the wind pushing through cracks in the stone walls like a ghostly lullaby. Above you, the Lord and his family might have slightly better blankets, maybe even a fur cloak. But don't be fooled, those grand beds are also damp, drafty, and alive with bugs. Now, close your eyes. Smell the acrid smoke from the torches. Hear the clank of armor as a knight fumbles with his rusty gauntlet. Taste the sour tang of yesterday's ale on your tongue. Feel the rough, itchy wool against your neck. It's only been an hour, and already you feel the creeping chill in your bones, the hunger gnawing at your belly, the bone-deep fatigue of endless chores and endless fear. And that, dear listener, is just the beginning. You shiver as the last ember of warmth flees your body. The air inside the castle is thick and heavy, as if each breath must squeeze through centuries of dust and despair before it reaches your lungs. Somewhere nearby, you hear a hacking cough echo down a stairwell. That's not surprising. Respiratory infections are as common as lice here. The castle is damp all year round, a perfect breeding ground for sickness. The walls we romanticize today as romantic ruins were, in reality, death traps of cold stones that never truly dried. Your stomach rumbles again. You look around, hoping to find something edible. But tonight's fare is meager. The Lord's table is slightly better stocked. A congealed meat pie, a hard cheese crawling with tiny maggots, and some dried fruit that tastes of dust and mold. These are delicacies compared to what the servants get. Boiled turnips, a crust of stale bread so hard it might crack a tooth. Imagine trying to eat in the flickering glow of tallow candles. The candles themselves reek of rancid animal fat. The smell seeps into everything, your clothes, your hair, even your dreams. A boy scurries past with a chamber pot, sloshing ominously. He empties it out a narrow slit in the outer wall, the so-called garderobe. You flinch at the splash below. That same courtyard you bravely crossed earlier is now a soup of human waste, rotting scraps and rats the size of cats. In the servants' quarters, you'd find people curled together on the rush-covered floor. One woman cradles a baby, her face hollow, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. The baby whimpers, probably already suffering from malnutrition. Childhood here is not a long or gentle journey. Most children won't make it past their 5th birthday. Above you, the Lord's family is huddled near a small brazier. Even they look miserable. The lady of the castle, draped in stiff woolen layers and fur that smells faintly of wet dog, picks at a dry scab on her cheek. Hygiene isn't a priority. Even the nobility bathe perhaps once or twice a year. Soap? A luxury. You might instead rub sweet-smelling herbs on your skin to disguise the odor, but that's like tossing rose petals into a cesspool. As you tiptoe deeper into the castle, you hear snoring, deep, rumbling, as if the walls themselves are exhaling. Somewhere a dog barks, perhaps chasing a rat in the dark hallways. You wonder how anyone sleeps through this endless cacophony of hacking coughs, groaning beams, shuffling rats, and dripping water. You reach the armory, drawn by the faint metallic tang in the air. Rows of pikes, swords, and battered shields glimmer dully in the torchlight. They stand as a testament to the constant threat of war, raids, or betrayal. The castle isn't just a home. It's a fortress, a last refuge, and a symbol of power built on. Outside in the village, peasants bend under heavy loads, dreaming of warmth they'll never feel. The taxes they pay keep the Lord's meager pie on the table and the thin furs on his bed. You press your fingers to the cold stone wall, feeling the ancient chill seep into your bones. You can almost hear the echoes of desperate prayers whispered by kitchen boys, chambermaids, and stable hands, who wish for nothing more than a warm night and a full belly. But tonight neither you nor they will get that wish. The hours crawl by like weary peasants under a sack of grain. You're trying to stay awake, but your eyelids droop. Each moment feels longer than the last, stretching like a cold winter dawn. Outside, the wind howls against the battlements, pushing icy drafts through every crack. Your toes are numb now. You tuck them beneath the rough wool blanket, if you were lucky enough to find one. You hear footsteps approaching. A guard shuffles past, his chainmail clinking softly, each link smeared with rust. He leans heavily on a spear, half blind in one eye from an old infection. You can smell his sweat before he's even close, sour, sharp, and somehow both human and animal at once. You think you might catch some sleep, but then a sharp, high-pitched squeal pierces the silence. A rat fight. The creatures claw and bite at each other over a bit of rancid cheese dropped from the Lord's table. You pull the blanket tighter and shudder, imagining them creeping closer to your bedroll. In the next room, a maid is still working by candlelight. She scrapes hardened grease from a wooden trench. Medieval plates weren't fancy porcelain, but simple slabs of wood, sometimes shared by 2 or 3 people. Once the scraping is done, she rinses them in a bucket of greasy water that hasn't been changed in days. The stench is unforgettable, an acrid perfume of spoiled meat, sweat, and ash. Near the kitchen, another servant pokes at a cauldron of pottage. This thin, soupy gruel is flavored with whatever could be scavenged. Some wilted herbs, a few carrots, maybe a scrap of bone if fortune smiled. No spices here. Pepper and cinnamon are for kings and traders. You can't help but notice how each person's face looks older than it should. A woman in her 20s already has deep lines carved into her forehead, her eyes sunken and rimmed with red. A stable boy, barely 15, has missing teeth and a hacking cough that rattles in his chest like a broken bell. In the distant chapel, a priest mutters prayers to ward off pestilence and protect the castle from sieges. But you suspect the prayers are more for show than salvation. Religion in the castle is a constant whisper, a bargaining chip with a god everyone fears, but few truly understand. A young page limps past, clutching a rag to his bleeding hand. A kitchen knife slipped, and there are no bandages, just a dirty cloth and maybe some lard smeared over the wound to keep out evil spirits. The page doesn't cry out, he knows better. Noise invites punishment or scorn. You feel the weight of the walls closing in, heavy with centuries of fear and dampness. Each corridor seems to hold a secret, stifled cries behind doors, quick glances exchanged in the torchlight, the echo of hurried steps down stone staircases. Suddenly, you long for something warm, tea, a shower, soft sheets. But here, warmth is a dangerous luxury. Those who keep closest to the hearth risk burns and smoke inhalation. Those further away risk frostbite and death in their sleep. And so, you lie still, listening to the symphony of misery, the scraping of bowls, the shivering breaths, the occasional pained moan echoing down a hallway. You realize that the castle isn't a storybook fortress, but a grim, living creature, always hungry, always cold, always demanding sacrifice. The hour grows late, your mind drifts in and out of restless half-dreams. Outside, the night deepens, and inside, the suffering thickens like a fog. The darkness thickens, wrapping the castle like a damp cloak. You breathe in slowly, each inhale tinged with the smell of burning tallow, mildew, and human desperation. Somewhere beyond the walls, a dog howls, answered by a chorus of distant wolves. You pull the blanket tighter, but the cold gnaws at your spine like tiny teeth. At this hour, most of the castle's inhabitants are finally asleep, or trying to be. But for many, sleep is a battleground. The servants twist and turn on their straw mats, scratching at lice and fleas. One woman sobs quietly, her shoulders shaking under her thin smock. Her hands are swollen and cracked from endless scrubbing and hauling heavy buckets. A few rooms above, the Lord's chamber offers no fairy tale relief. The Lord himself lies sprawled in a grand but drafty bed, layered with stiff furs that smell of animal musk. Next to him, his wife stares at the ceiling, her mind churning with fears of childbirth, betrayal, and the ever-present threat of war. In the corner, a chamber pot sits, sloshing ominously whenever someone shifts. The smell wafts through the room, mixing with the sour scent of sweat-soaked sheets. Beyond the bedchamber, in the nursery, a young nurse rocks a coughing child. The baby's cheeks are flushed, his breath raspy. There is no doctor, no clean linen, no gentle remedies. A bit of honey and water, a whispered prayer. That's all she can offer. Many children simply slip away in the night, their tiny bodies bundled and taken out silently before dawn. Elsewhere, the guards huddle in the gatehouse, sharing a cracked clay jug of weak ale to numb the cold. Their armor is battered, stained from past battles and endless guard shifts. One man's toes have turned black from frostbite, but he doesn't complain. He knows a replacement waits eagerly. Down in the kitchens, the embers have died to a faint orange glow. A few servants curl close to the hearth, hoping to catch a final flicker of warmth. Their dreams are heavy with hunger, nightmares of punishment, and distant fields they once called home before being pressed into service. You shift uncomfortably on your straw sack, feeling every sharp twig and flea bite. Your stomach churns from the meager scraps you managed to swallow earlier. A stale crust of bread, a sip of soured ale. Your body craves more, but nothing is coming. Through the thin slit of a window, the moon stares down, pale and unblinking like a silent judge. You feel suddenly exposed, as if the moon itself is counting your every shiver, every pang of regret for stepping into this medieval nightmare. You think of your own soft bed, the hum of a heater, a glass of clean water within arm's reach. Here, even water is a gamble, drawn from wells shared with livestock and latrines. It is cloudy and often carries the silent threat of dysentery. A final, hollow echo bounces through the stone corridors. A rat scuttling, a baby's cough, a woman's quiet sob. These are the lullabies of castle life. And now, as you wrap yourself tighter, your mind realizes something that makes your blood turn colder than the stone floor. This place isn't built for you. It was never meant for comfort or peace. It is a fortress of survival, a monument to fear and hunger, a daily negotiation with death itself. Sleep feels like a distant promise, almost a betrayal of your senses. But you close your eyes anyway, trying to forget the gnawing cold, the itching bites, the endless echo of suffering. The night presses on, stretching endlessly like a dark tapestry woven from sighs and whimpers. You try to steady your breath, but each inhalation feels like swallowing cold needles. In the great hall below, a servant creeps silently, gathering bones and scraps from the Lord's earlier supper. Her hands tremble as she snatches a half-gnawed bone, slipping it into her apron. She'll risk a beating if she's caught, but hunger is a fiercer master than any lord. In a nearby corridor, a young page hunches over a candle stub, trying to mend a torn tunic. His fingers bleed from the needle's repeated jabs, but he knows he can't stop. Tomorrow brings another day of endless errands and harsh commands. Somewhere in the darkness, you hear a muffled cough, followed by an eerie silence. Perhaps someone has slipped away to the next world tonight. It wouldn't be surprising. Death is a frequent uninvited guest in these halls. No elaborate funerals, no comforting songs, just a quick burial beyond the walls in shallow earth, covered by rough stones to keep away the dogs. A guard staggers past again, his breath stinking of stale ale and regret. He leans against the wall, trying not to collapse. You can almost hear his thoughts. The debts, the failed harvests, the family left behind in a cold village hut. Higher up in the Lord's private chamber, a soft argument unfurls like a poisonous vine. The lady complains about the chill seeping through the walls. The Lord snaps back, blaming the masons, the servants, the world itself. Their voices hiss in the dark, filled with exhaustion and resentment. You realize even power cannot shield them from the cold fingers of medieval reality. In the kitchen, a pot of pottage simmers weakly, more water than substance. A woman stirs it slowly, her eyes hollow. Each swirl releases a faint, sour aroma, enough to keep hope alive, but never enough to satisfy. You shift again, your body aching. The straw beneath you pokes cruelly, and your skin crawls with the movement of unseen insects. Sleep refuses to come fully. It only teases you, dangling brief visions of warmth and safety before dragging you back to the echoing misery around you. You think of how quickly comfort evaporates here. A small injury festers into infection. A missed meal spirals into starvation. Everything teeters on a blade's edge. In one corner, a young girl tries to braid her tangled hair, humming a thin, wavering tune to soothe herself. The melody drifts, fragile as spider silk, before dissolving into the stone. Above all this, the castle itself seems to breathe, walls shifting with moans and creaks, as if the ancient stones are alive and whispering old secrets. You can almost hear centuries of voices layered over each other. Prayers, curses, confessions, final breaths. And yet, beneath all this darkness, a strange warmth stirs in your chest. A tiny ember of gratitude for the soft bed you left behind, for the hot tea waiting in your kitchen, for the fresh air and clean sheets. You realize that survival here isn't merely about enduring the cold. It's about enduring constant fear, hunger, and loss. Tonight, you lie there, eyes open, listening to the castle's night song. You understand now. You wouldn't survive a single night, not because of one fatal blow or a sudden fever, but because the castle devours slowly, one shiver, one scratch, one sigh at a time. The moon has shifted higher now, its pale glow slipping through arrow slits and cracked shutters, painting silver scars across the cold stone floors. You lie still, every joint aching as if you'd been working in the fields since sunrise. Somewhere above, the bells in the tiny chapel toll softly, an early morning prayer for protection against sickness and sieges. The priest's whispered Latin echoes off the walls like a ghostly chant, more a ritual of habit than true faith. In the courtyard below, a stable hand is already stirring. He trudges through the mud, ice crunching beneath his rag-wrapped feet. His task? To check on the horses, many of which are skeletal from poor fodder and endless journeys. He stops to pick up a weak foal that collapsed during the night. The foal's soft whimper rises into the cold air before vanishing into silence. Near the kitchens, a scullery maid starts the fire again. She blows gently, cheeks puffed and red, her hair damp with sweat despite the cold. Each breath fills the room with a wet, smoky haze that clings to every surface, your lungs included. In the cramped servants' hall, a young boy picks lice from another boy's hair. They do this absent-mindedly, as if it were no more remarkable than tying one's shoes. The itching is constant, a background hum of discomfort that no one ever truly escapes. A knight stomps through the corridor above you, his spurs clinking, his armor scuffed and heavy. He mutters curses under his breath about the poor supper, the draft in his chamber, and the constant fear of an unexpected attack. Even a man trained for battle trembles at the thought of a cold, sleepless night. Meanwhile, the lady of the castle wraps a heavy woolen shawl tighter around her thin shoulders. She gazes into the darkness, haunted by dreams of childbirth gone wrong, of famine outside the walls, of her children's futures if they survive long enough to have them. You feel your body weaken further, as if the very air siphons your strength. The promise of warmth seems so far away, it might as well be a fairy tale. The constant noise, rats squealing, servants shuffling, dogs barking in the distance, wraps around your head like a thick fog. You think of the villagers beyond the moat, their huts little more than mud and thatch, already stirring to start their own miserable day. Many owe grain or labor to the Lord, forced to serve in exchange for meager protection. Their nights are no better than yours, often worse. A cook nearby slices a thin piece of salted pork, carefully hiding a scrap for herself under her sleeve. Hunger shapes every thought here. Trust is rare, kindness rarer still. Survival is a daily negotiation. Whom to trust, whom to betray, what tiny comfort to cling to. And as your eyes flutter, you realize that each shiver, each hollow groan from the walls, each echoing footstep is a small reminder that this place was never designed for human comfort. It was designed to keep enemies out, and those inside barely alive. Yet somehow, in this bleakness, a strange clarity emerges. Life today, even on your worst day, is 1,000 luxuries stacked on top of each other. Soft pajamas, hot showers, clean water, a private space where no one watches or judges your every breath. You're not just a visitor in this castle tonight. You're a ghost, drifting through centuries of suffering, touching each heartbeat, each hungry stomach, each tear-soaked pillow. And you understand, to truly survive here, you would have to surrender more than warmth. You would have to surrender hope itself. Dawn is still a rumor on the horizon, a faint silver blush hiding behind heavy clouds. Inside the castle, time feels elastic, stretching, coiling, then snapping back with each echoing footstep or distant moan. You curl tighter on your straw mat, but comfort is a foreign language here. The straw is damp now, and your joints ache as though the stone floor itself is clawing at your bones. In the great hall, the remnants of last night's meager feast still sit on the trestle tables. The candle stubs have guttered out, leaving streaks of wax like pale tears on the rough wood. A few scraggly dogs nose through the scraps, growling at each other, their ribs sharp under matted fur. A servant girl creeps in to clear the mess. Her hands are red and raw, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. She moves like a wraith, silent and unseen, except for the occasional wince when she bends too far or knocks her bruised knees against the table legs. Nearby, a young scribe rubs the sleep from his eyes as he unrolls parchment. Ink is precious, almost as precious as clean water, and each word must be measured carefully. He dips his quill, fingers trembling from the cold, writing out an inventory of barley, salt, and dried peas. His handwriting shakes with each shiver, a living testament to the icy breath of the castle. Above, in a narrow room, a woman kneels beside a sick child, wiping his forehead with a filthy cloth. She mutters soft prayers, her voice breaking like thin ice. The child's eyes roll back, his breath rattles in shallow, halting waves. Each cough echoes like a hammer strike, a grim percussion that everyone has learned to ignore or accept. Meanwhile, in the outer ward, a blacksmith hammers at a blade. Sparks leap into the air, glowing for a heartbeat before vanishing into the dark like dying fireflies. His arms are thick, but his face is hollow, lined with soot and worry. The blade is not for show. Raiders and rival lords are a constant threat. Even in the heart of this stone giant, there is no such thing as safety. A group of guards huddle by a brazier, their hands hovering above the tiny flames. Their laughter is brittle, cracking like old parchment. You hear snippets of their chatter, debts owed to moneylenders, lost harvests, rumors of plague creeping ever closer. You shift your head and look toward the high table. There, a tapestry depicting heroic hunts and grand banquets droops limply on the damp wall. Mice scurry behind it, nesting in the folds of woven lions and stags. A chamberlain shuffles through the hall, inspecting each servant with a cold, calculating eye. A single mistake, a dropped jug, a forgotten command could mean a whipping, or worse, the loss of your meager place in this brutal hierarchy. You realize then that the castle is not just stone and iron. It is a living organism, feeding on sweat, fear, and obedience. Each day, it demands its pound of flesh from every soul within its walls. And as the first hints of morning seep through the narrow slits, you feel your spirit sag under the weight of it all. The thought of rising, of enduring another day in these endless corridors, feels impossible. Outside your own time, far away in your warm room, you might sigh with relief. But here, there is no sigh, only another shuffle forward into the grind of survival. Morning finally breaks, though morning feels like a cruel jest rather than salvation. Pale light seeps into the castle like a timid guest, illuminating every crack, every scurrying rat, every exhausted face. You rise, or rather you attempt to rise. Your limbs are heavy as iron, your back screams from the unkind bed of straw and cold stone. As you stagger upright, your head swims with hunger and fatigue. In the courtyard below, the stable hands are already at work. They scrub horse tack with frozen fingers, their breath rising in ghostly clouds. One boy slips on the icy ground and lands hard. The head stableman roars at him, curses echoing off the walls. The boy scrambles up, eyes wide with fear, knowing a beating might follow. Near the kitchens, servants haul buckets of murky water up narrow stairs. Each step is a gamble. Slip and you might break an ankle or worse. The water is drawn from a well outside, a grim soup shared by livestock, rats, and anyone desperate enough to drink. You think of your clean tap water at home and feel a pang of gratitude so sharp it almost hurts. In the great hall, a few privileged souls break their fast. A crust of yesterday's bread dipped in thin ale, perhaps a spoonful of cold pottage. The Lord, perched high above them at the head table, chews a tough slab of salted meat, his jaw working like a tired millstone. His eyes are sunken, dark circles telling the same story as the servants below. Nobody truly thrives here. A maid carries a basket of rushes to spread across the floors again. Each layer tries to mask the ever-present stench, sweat, rotting scraps, chamber pot accidents. But the rushes themselves bring more problems. Fleas nest in them, sometimes even beetles or worms. Every step you take is a little squirming surprise beneath your feet. Above the hall, a young girl tries to dress the lady of the castle. She laces up a gown of stiff, scratchy wool, pulls tight a bodice that leaves no room to breathe. The lady winces, but beauty here is duty, not pleasure. Her pale face is dotted with smallpox scars, each one a silent testament to a lifetime of unseen battles. Outside the walls, you can just glimpse peasants trudging to the fields, their breath rising in long white ribbons. They owe labor or grain to the castle, a tax extracted without mercy, leaving them little to survive on through the next frost. A priest passes through the hall, eyes low, reciting prayers as he sprinkles a weak-smelling mixture meant to purify the air. The smell is more pungent than pleasant, like herbs left too long in a damp cellar. He murmurs blessings, but even he looks starved for comfort, his robe patched and his shoes worn through. As you stand there, you notice your own trembling hands. You're not only hungry, you're deeply, profoundly cold in a way that feels more spiritual than physical, as if the chill has seeped into your soul. You hear a guard bark an order, a baby cry in a distant room, the clang of iron on iron from the forge. The sounds merge into a single low, droning chant. Survival, survival, survival. You start to understand at last that the castle doesn't want you here. It has no space for weakness, no patience for comfort. You aren't just out of place. You're an intruder in a world designed to grind every living being down to a husk. And so, as the sun rises over the frost-laced battlements, you realize that surviving even one night isn't about physical strength. It's about surrendering to a life of endless toil and unending hunger, something you were never meant to endure. The sun finally pushes above the jagged horizon, a weak and watery light that barely warms the stones. You might imagine sunlight as a blessing, but here it only reveals the grime caked into every corner, every face, every ragged garment. Your joints creak as you shuffle toward the hall. You pass a servant girl emptying a chamber pot out of a narrow window, the contents splattering below with a sickening slap. A plume of steam rises in the morning chill. You gag, instinctively covering your mouth, but the smell clings to your hair, your clothes, your very skin. Nearby, a young boy carries a basket of onions, his hands purple from cold. He drops one and freezes in terror. A steward swoops in, delivering a sharp slap across his cheek before sending him scurrying, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. In a small alcove, an old woman tends to a weaver's loom. Her fingers are gnarled like twisted branches, her eyes squinting against the dim light. Each thread is coarse and rough, dyed in muddy browns and dull greens. Fashion here is dictated by survival, not beauty. Clothes are patched until they become a patchwork of memories. Each tear a winter, each stain a lean season. Back in the kitchens, a cauldron of pottage bubbles lazily over a smoky fire. The cook stirs it with a heavy wooden spoon, adding handfuls of wilted greens, a few scraps of old bacon rind. She tastes it, grimaces, and mutters that it will have to do. Hunger dulls all complaints. The lady of the castle sits by a small, grimy window, attempting to embroider. Her needlework is more a distraction than a joy, her stitches crooked from cold, stiffened fingers. She pauses to warm her hands on a flickering candle, her eyes distant, dreaming perhaps of warmer lands she's heard of only in traveling merchant stories. The guards begin to swap shifts, some trudging off to rest in cramped guard rooms, others shaking off sleep to climb the battlements. Their faces are drawn, eyelids heavy from a night spent listening for phantom enemies in the dark. Even as the sun rises, danger never truly sets here. A barefoot child slips past, hugging a chipped wooden bowl, hoping for a scrap from the kitchen. She darts like a mouse, eyes wide and vigilant. Her hair is tangled into knots, her feet black with grime, but her spirit clings to life with stubborn ferocity. Outside the walls, peasants already bend over frozen fields, hacking at the stubborn earth with wooden hoes. The morning mist coils around them, a silent partner in their struggle. You imagine their empty stomachs and the ache in their backs that never truly leaves. Inside, your own body begins to tremble violently. The cold seeps in as though it's learning your secrets, exploring your softest places. Every step feels heavier, your lungs tight and brittle. You think of your warm kitchen at home, your kettle singing softly, the gentle scent of toast. Here, a warm meal is as rare as a rainbow in winter. Here, every luxury you take for granted would be a miracle sung about for generations. As you watch this endless morning routine unfold, The realization blooms quietly but powerfully inside you. No one in this castle is truly alive by your standards. They are all enduring, existing in a limbo of necessity, fear, and sacrifice. And you, dear listener, you are not made for this. Not for the relentless ache of cold that outlasts dawn, nor for the taste of despair in every breath. As the weak sun crawls higher, the castle begins to stir in full. But this isn't the lively hum of a modern morning, no scent of fresh coffee, no gentle music on a radio. Here, each sound is edged with hardship, each movement weighed down by fatigue. The great hall is being swept now, though swept might be generous. A boy drags a bundle of dry rushes across the floor, pushing around crumbs, bones, and lumps of who knows what into a corner. His eyes are half closed, his mouth open in silent yawns. He's maybe 10, but already his back is beginning to hunch, bent by endless labor. In a corner of the hall, a young woman patches a torn cloak by firelight. The cloak smells of wet wool and old sweat. Each stitch is a quiet prayer that it will hold through one more winter. Her hands tremble, either from cold or hunger, or perhaps both. A knight stands nearby, belting on his sword with slow, heavy motions. His armor is dented, the leather straps cracked and stiff. You'd think him a symbol of strength, but his eyes are sunken and rimmed with red, haunted by sleeplessness and worry over unpaid debts or the next unexpected skirmish. Outside in the bailey, the smith's hammer starts again, a dull, rhythmic song echoing against the walls. Sparks burst like tiny stars, illuminating the blacksmith's gaunt cheeks and soot-streaked forehead. His breath comes in short, white puffs, each exhale a testament to the cold that refuses to leave even as the day begins. A servant scuttles past you with a basin of water, slopping icy droplets onto the stones. Bathing isn't a daily luxury here. It's an event saved for holy days, if at all. This water is meant for a noble's hands, maybe his face, but never a full body wash. The castle's people live steeped in their own scent, a mingling of earth, animal, and age. Near a side door, you see a boy and a girl whispering, sharing a shriveled apple stolen from the storeroom. Their cheeks are hollow, their eyes darting constantly to make sure no steward catches them. Each bite is slow, almost reverent, as if the apple were a precious gemstone instead of a bruised piece of fruit. Higher up, the lady of the castle peers out through a narrow window. Her breath clouds the glass as she watches peasants shuffle across the yard. She feels no real power despite her rank, just layers of fear, of childbirth, of disease, of political plots swirling beyond the thick walls. Her rings clink against the window as she fiddles nervously, her nails bitten to the quick. In the kitchens, a girl tends a pot of barley porridge, stirring as if hypnotized. The porridge bubbles slowly, thick and pale, with the occasional oat husk floating to the top. She scoops out a ladleful for a guard, who snatches it without thanks before returning to his cold post on the wall. You inhale shakily, feeling each breath scrape down your throat. Every glimpse you catch, each face, each stiff hand, each resigned sigh, reminds you that this place is not a home, but a living engine fueled by human exhaustion. In this castle, each day is a small battle, each night a deeper siege against the body and the spirit. And you, stumbling in your imaginary borrowed boots, realize there's no softness here, no gentle corner to hide. Even as daylight floods the halls, it offers no warmth, only the harsh clarity of survival's cost. The morning deepens, but warmth remains a distant wish. The castle now hums with a rough, ragged energy, like an old dog forced up for one more day of guard duty. You move stiffly through the hall, feet dragging. Your stomach is a hollow drum, echoing with every passing smell from the kitchens. A potboy scurries past carrying a bucket of dishwater so filthy it looks like thin gray sludge. He dumps it out a side door, the splash mingling with the sour stench that clings to every surface. He wipes his nose on his sleeve and hurries back, eyes wide with fear. Late tasks mean punishment. Nearby, a group of washerwomen squat over basins, scrubbing coarse linen against rough wooden boards. Their hands are red and swollen, their fingernails rimmed with dirt. Each breath they take puffs out in tiny clouds. The steam from their buckets wraps around them like a ghostly veil. They talk in low murmurs about chilblains, lost children, and who might not survive the coming winter. A cook heaves a sack of root vegetables onto a table. Each turnip and onion is a small triumph. She eyes them as a jeweler might study gems. She knows exactly how thin she must slice, how far she can stretch this meager bounty. Hunger here is a permanent guest, sitting at every table. In a narrow corridor, a knight squire polishes a battered shield. His hands tremble, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. The shield is scarred with deep gashes, each a memory of a skirmish or drunken brawl. The squire pauses to stifle a yawn, only to jolt upright when a passing steward glares. High above, in a drafty solar, the lady's children shiver beside a tiny brazier. Their cheeks are splotched red from cold. One child holds a doll stitched from scraps, its head lolling sideways. Another child tries to read from a religious text, stumbling over Latin words while teeth chatter. Even the noble offspring are prisoners of the castle's frigid embrace. In the bailey, a group of guards drill with wooden pikes. Their movements are slow and sloppy, feet slipping in the mud. The captain shouts until his voice cracks, but no one truly hears him. They are too busy battling their own numbed limbs and hollow bellies. An elderly priest trudges past, bent nearly double. He drags a sack of herbs and dried flowers meant to cleanse the sick rooms. His face is a map of creases and regrets, each step a small penance for the sins of a lifetime. You glance down at your own hands. They're trembling violently now, your fingertips nearly blue. You imagine dipping them into a hot basin, feeling the sting of warmth return. But here there is no basin, no relief, only the slow march of chores and duty. You begin to understand that in this world, even a single sunrise doesn't promise safety or comfort. It only means another chance to endure, another chance to shuffle across frozen floors, to scrape the bottom of a pot, to count each heartbeat as a reluctant victory. This castle is not a fortress for dreams. It is a machine built to keep fear alive and hope fragile. Every sigh, every silent tear wiped away in a corner, every muffled prayer beneath rough blankets proves it. You close your eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by the thick fog of suffering, and somewhere in your mind, the warmth of your own life flickers like a distant star, a reminder that you do not belong here. As the sun inches higher, it casts long, pale streaks across the courtyard, as though trying to warm the castle but failing miserably. The light reveals every crack in the walls, every cobweb trembling with dew, every despairing face trudging from one duty to the next. You move through the corridors, your breath a thin fog before your lips. Every inhalation feels like ice scraping your lungs. In a narrow hall, a servant girl sweeps ashes from the hearth into a basket. Her hair hangs in greasy strands around her face, her eyes dull from endless, repetitive toil. Each movement is practiced, mechanical, as if her spirit has long since floated away to somewhere warmer, somewhere kinder. Nearby, a steward barks orders at two boys dragging a sack of grain. The sack leaks steadily, leaving a pale trail on the flagstones. One boy stumbles and receives a sharp cuff to the ear. He doesn't cry. He only lowers his head, tightens his grip, and pushes forward. In a drafty side chamber, a young woman combs out wool for spinning. The raw fibers snag her fingers, leaving red scratches. Her lap is full of stray tufts, and the wooden comb creaks with each drag. She hums softly to herself, an old lullaby her mother once sang to her before hunger and frost replaced lullabies with chores and fear. Above, in the solar, the lady picks at a dry piece of bread. Her lips are chapped and cracked, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The small brazier at her feet has gone out, and no one rushes to relight it. Even her fine gown, though embroidered and heavy, cannot fight the gnawing cold that has seeped into her bones. Outside, peasants line up at the gate with baskets of vegetables and sacks of grain to pay their taxes. Their faces are gray with exhaustion. Some look as though they might faint where they stand. They clutch their bundles like offerings to an indifferent god, hoping to avoid punishment for any shortfall. On the battlements, a guard dozes against the wall, head lolling. He jerks awake whenever a captain's footsteps approach, his face creasing into an obedient mask. Sleep is dangerous here. Every missed moment of vigilance invites disaster. In the kitchen, the cook ladles thin broth into wooden bowls, one by one. Each bowl is barely half full. The line of servants waiting moves slowly, each person clasping their bowl as if it might vanish at any second. When someone receives their ration, they turn away quickly, guarding it with hunched shoulders as they retreat to a corner. You feel a gnawing ache deep in your belly, a hunger that seems to crawl through your ribs and up your spine. Your hands tremble, not just from cold, but from a primal fear. The knowledge that here, no one is safe from want. The castle isn't merely uncomfortable, it's a daily crucible that forges each soul into something harder, something more desperate. A young mother cradles her baby in a corner, humming a lullaby so quiet you can barely hear it over the clatter of pots and the shuffling of feet. Her eyes dart anxiously to the cook, to the steward, to anyone who might notice her stealing an extra moment by the warmth of the kitchen fire. You can almost feel her pulse, quick and sharp, matching your own. And you realize, deep in the marrow of your bones, that you would not make it even a single day here. This is not your world. It is a labyrinth of endless frost, sharp elbows, empty bowls, and silent sacrifices. By midday, the pale sun hangs uselessly above the castle, more a weak suggestion than a source of warmth. You might expect some reprieve, a pause for comfort or joy, but there is none. The hours here blend into a single, gray struggle. In the courtyard, a butcher wrestles with a pig carcass, his knife slicing through thick layers of fat and muscle. Flies swarm despite the chill, drawn to the smell of blood and offal. The butcher's apron is crusted and stiff, his hands red and cracked, each movement a quiet war against the numbness creeping up his fingers. Nearby, an old hound licks the stones, searching for scraps. Its ribs press sharp against its patchy fur, each breath wheezing in and out like a tired bellows. Along the wall, an apprentice mason chips at crumbling mortar, repairing a crack that threatens to swallow half the tower. His hammering rings out, echoing against the walls and deep into the courtyard. Sweat trickles down his temples, mixing with dust to form gray rivulets on his cheeks. In a small chapel, a priest mutters mass for a handful of servants. Their heads bow low, not out of devotion but exhaustion. Each word of Latin drifts above them like mist, thin and powerless against their private worries. You walk past the kitchens again. The cook shouts at a girl to fetch more water. She runs with a bucket almost her own size, water sloshing onto her thin wool dress. Each step she takes leaves wet footprints on the cold stones, and she gasps for breath, her lips blue. In the upper galleries, the ladies' children shuffle along, each carrying a small bundle of sticks to fuel their brazier. Their little fingers curl around the splinters, skin pale and soft, wholly unprepared for even this small burden. One child stumbles, and his sticks scatter. He freezes in terror, eyes wide as he waits for the nursemaid's scolding hand. A few knights gather in the armory, checking their weapons. Their laughter is brittle, forced, more a shield against fear than a sign of camaraderie. They inspect dented helmets and rusting swords, each flaw a whispered reminder that survival depends not just on skill, but on sheer luck. A laundress hangs damp clothes on a line strung across a narrow walkway. The garments freeze into stiff shapes almost immediately, snapping in the wind like ghostly flags. She pauses to rub her hands together, eyes closed in a silent prayer for just a moment of warmth. Your own breath catches as you watch them all. A bone-deep fatigue creeps into your muscles, as if your body finally understands this place doesn't allow for softness or rest. You see now that this castle is not a symbol of fairy tale grandeur. It is a vast, echoing organism, alive, hungry, endlessly consuming the people trapped within it. Each day is an offering to its insatiable hunger. Blood from the butcher's knife, warmth stolen from small bodies, time and hope traded for one more moment of existence, and you, still trembling and weak, can barely imagine making it to sundown without breaking, without weeping in some dark corner, without clawing at the walls, begging for a single crumb of mercy. But mercy is not a language this place speaks. As the day trudges onward, shadows stretch long and thin across the walls, creeping into corners like silent watchmen. The castle seems to inhale and exhale in heavy, rhythmic sighs, each one carrying the scent of soot, sweat, and stale meat. You move toward the outer courtyard, where a line of peasants bends beneath heavy bundles of firewood and sacks of root vegetables. Their shoulders sag as they shuffle toward the storerooms, each step an act of surrender to the endless demands of the castle. A man coughs violently, doubling over as his sack spills across the frozen ground. No one stops to help. In this world, pausing to help can mean your own downfall. Nearby, a carpenter fits new boards onto a rickety cart. His hands are calloused, nails blackened. Each blow of his mallet sounds like a muffled drumbeat in the winter air. His apprentice stands close by, shifting from foot to foot, teeth chattering. On a narrow stone staircase, a kitchen maid carries 2 large jars of ale. The jars wobble dangerously as she climbs, her knees shaking. One slip could mean not just a scolding, but a week without food as punishment. Or worse, dismissal into the cold world beyond the walls. In the kitchens, a boy peels onions with methodical slowness. His eyes water, tears tracing clean lines down his dirt-smeared face. He pauses to rub his eyes with a filthy sleeve, then continues, each movement heavy with resignation. Up in the lady's solar, she leans against the window ledge, staring into the gray afternoon. She picks at the stitching on her sleeve absent-mindedly, mind wandering to lost friends, or perhaps a summer that once promised warmth, but only delivered storms and sickness. The children lie nearby, curled beneath a thin blanket, too tired to play or study. Outside, guards gather logs for the evening watch fires. Their armor clinks dully, each plate cold against their skin. One guard flexes his fingers, trying to bring life back to them. Another leans on his spear, eyes closing for a dangerous moment of rest. In a tiny alcove, an elderly woman kneels before a cracked statue of the Virgin Mary. Her prayers are barely more than breath, lips moving in desperate rhythm. She clutches a string of wooden beads, fingers working over them as if to wring warmth from each tiny knot. Beyond the walls, faint wisps of smoke curl from peasant huts. You imagine families huddled around weak fires, children pressing close to thin-boned mothers, each mouth hoping for a scrap of turnip or a spoonful of barley. Here, inside the towering walls, you feel no safer than they do. The cold is relentless, the hunger patient, the silence full of judgments. You catch sight of your own trembling hands again, the blue tint creeping into your fingertips. Your mind drifts to your bed at home. Soft sheets, a thick blanket, a nightlight glowing softly in the corner. Here, there is no refuge. Each new hour is another test of your will, another toll demanded by the castle. And as the sun begins its slow, weary descent, you realize this place never truly sleeps, and it never truly forgives. It only waits, watches, and devours. The sun begins its slow retreat behind the gray hills, smearing the sky with streaks of dull orange and pale violet. You might imagine sunset as a gentle sigh before rest, but here, it feels more like a warning. The castle tightens its muscles in preparation for another night of cold, hunger, and watchfulness. In the courtyard, the last peasants hurry out the gate, their empty baskets swinging at their sides. One woman stumbles, pausing to adjust the rag around her feet that pretends to be a shoe. Her child tugs at her skirt, pointing to the darkening sky, eager to escape before the gates close. A guard calls out from the battlements, his voice echoing down like a raven's croak. He waves at another guard to secure the main gate. The iron portcullis screeches as it lowers, the sound sharp enough to make your teeth ache. Inside, servants rush to finish chores before full dark descends. A young girl carries a basket of wilted greens from the kitchen, her thin arm shaking under its weight. She nearly drops it when a dog snarls at her feet, and she scurries on, heart hammering. In the great hall, benches are pushed aside, and a few torches are lit. Their weak flames sputter, casting long, wavy shadows that dance across the stone walls like restless spirits. A cook ladles out evening pottage, thinner than in the morning, as though the day itself has sapped what little nourishment it held. A servant boy scrapes hardened candle drips off the tables, stacking the wax pieces carefully to be remelted later. His fingers are sticky and blackened, but he dares not complain. Each scrap of wax is too precious to waste. Upstairs, the lady of the castle instructs her maid to close the heavy shutters. They creak on rusty hinges, groaning like a tired beast. The maid pulls a woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders and mutters a prayer under her breath, her eyes darting nervously toward the window as if expecting a ghost to slip through the crack. In a far corner, an old man tends a brazier. He feeds it twigs sparingly, each small flame cherished like a secret. The heat barely reaches beyond his knees, but he stares into it with an intensity that suggests he's remembering better, warmer days. A knight paces in the corridor, armor partially unbuckled, his breath forming clouds. He mutters curses, replaying imagined battles or insults received at court. The clink of his sword against his leg punctuates each step, a rhythm of frustration and weariness. As the last light fades, you feel the castle's true nature unfurl. It isn't simply a shelter, it's a living gauntlet of tests. Each night is a siege against the human body and spirit, an unending gamble with frost and fear. You shiver violently, the cold a living creature now, creeping up your spine, wrapping around your ribs like iron bands. Your mind drifts to modern comforts again. A mug of hot tea, the soft glow of bedside lamps, the easy warmth of central heating. Here, in this stone labyrinth, you have none of it. Only the bitter taste of thin soup, the flicker of a dying torch, and the echo of unseen rats gnawing in the shadows. And as the sky turns from violet to black, you understand fully. You wouldn't last one sunset, let alone a night. This place demands everything you have, and then demands more. Night has now fully descended, wrapping the castle in a heavy, suffocating cloak. The stars glimmer weakly above, distant and indifferent to the struggles below. Inside, the great hall flickers with a few wavering torches. Their glow fails to chase the shadows from the corners where eyes, animal or human, seem to watch every move. The evening pottage is finished, and the last bowls are scraped so thoroughly they gleam in places. A few servants lick their fingers furtively, savoring each last trace of warmth and salt before slipping off to their straw pallets. In the kitchens, pots are stacked and soot-blackened spoons leaned against the hearth. A cook, her face smudged and lined, hunches close to the last dying coals. She lets her head fall forward for a moment of rest, but the stiff wooden bench offers no comfort. Nearby, a kitchen boy curls in a corner, clutching his thin wool cloak around his knees. His breath rasps in his throat, echoing softly in the cold room. Rats scurry boldly now, emboldened by the quiet and the leftover crumbs. You hear their tiny claws scratching the stones, sharp, deliberate, relentless. Up in the lady's chamber, the maid tucks heavy furs over her mistress, but the lady trembles still, her teeth clicking like dice in a cup. She murmurs half-finished prayers and grips a rosary so hard her knuckles go white. The guards rotate their watch shifts atop the battlements. One guard leans over the parapet, retching up the thin ale that was meant to warm his belly. Another curses under his breath, stamping his feet and blowing into cupped hands. The horizon beyond is black, the forest a jagged silhouette where danger forever hides. A knight sleeps in the armory, armor piled nearby like an abandoned exoskeleton. His head droops forward, and a thin line of drool glistens at the corner of his mouth. Even in sleep, his brow is furrowed, as if the battles never truly stop, just change shape in the dark. Below, in the servants' quarters, a young woman sobs quietly into her rough blanket. Her shoulder shakes, but no one moves to comfort her. Each is too absorbed in their own war with the cold and gnawing emptiness in their stomachs. You sit there, feeling your heartbeat slow, your fingers stiff and unresponsive. Every joint aches with a cold that feels ancient and personal, as if the stones themselves whisper cruelly into your bones. The air smells of tallow, wet wool, and something sour and undefinable, like old tears and rotted dreams. Each draft that slides through the cracks feels like a finger tracing along your spine. You might imagine lighting a small lamp to read or slipping into a warm bath. Here, there is no such escape. Just the heavy, echoing stillness punctuated by coughs, whimpers, and the endless scuttling of unseen creatures. Tonight, the castle does not sleep. It only waits. And you, curled against the stones, realize that surviving a night here isn't about battling monsters or fighting off invaders. It's about withstanding the quiet, relentless cruelty of simply being alive in this place. You begin to understand that in this fortress, every hour is another tiny death, of warmth, of softness, of hope. And you know with quiet certainty, by morning, you would be utterly undone. The night deepens into a cold so sharp it feels alive, crawling across your skin in thin, icy fingers. Every breath stings your lungs. Every heartbeat echoes against the damp stone walls, as though the castle is listening. In the kitchens, the final embers glow faintly, each spark like a dying firefly. A lone kitchen maid checks the pots once more, scraping the last bits of porridge stuck to the bottom. She licks the wooden spoon, eyes closed, savoring the meager warmth before slipping into a shivering pile of rags beside the hearth. Near the great hall, an elderly servant limps along, carrying a chamber pot to be emptied. His feet shuffle slowly, each step a cautious negotiation with pain and the slippery stones beneath him. As he tosses the contents into the courtyard below, a wave of foul steam rises into the night, mixing with the ever-present scent of soot and sweat. In a cramped sleeping nook, 3 young scullery maids huddle together beneath a single wool blanket. Their breaths rise in faint clouds, each one shivering violently. One girl whimpers softly in her sleep, dreaming perhaps of fields of flowers or warm bread. Dreams that vanish as soon as her eyes flutter open to the stony ceiling above. On the battlements, a guard leans against his pike, eyelids drooping dangerously. He jerks awake, startled by an owl's cry in the dark woods below. His teeth chatter in a violent rhythm, and he curses quietly, afraid his numb fingers might drop the weapon. In the chapel, a priest kneels before the altar, his head bowed so low his forehead nearly touches the cold stone floor. His whispered prayers bounce off the walls and disappear into the rafters like frightened birds. The candles beside him flicker and sputter, threatening to die, leaving him alone in darkness even deeper than his own fears. In the ladies' chamber, the maid struggles to keep the brazier burning, feeding it handfuls of brittle twigs. The lady stares at the ceiling, her mind likely lost in thoughts of lost children, broken alliances, or the constant ache in her bones. The rosary beads slip from her fingers and clatter softly to the floor, a tiny, echoing plea to a silent sky. Meanwhile, you sit alone, your body curled in a tight ball, muscles locked against the cold. You feel the castle pressing in around you, its breath rattling through the corridors, its hunger echoing in every cough and creak. Your mind wanders to warmth, your own bed, your favorite mug, the gentle whir of a heater at night. But here, there are no gentle sounds, no soft blankets, no reassurance, only the grinding chorus of survival. Sniffles, whimpers, rats scratching at discarded crumbs, and the distant sigh of a guard too cold to keep watch properly. You try to imagine making it through the night, but already your mind rebels. Your skin burns from the cold. Your ribs feel hollow. You are, in every sense, out of place, an intruder in a world that does not care whether you wake up again. And as you listen to the castle's nocturnal symphony, echoes, scratches, sighs, you realize that the greatest enemy here is not war or plague, but the sheer, ceaseless weight of simply surviving. The night now holds the castle in its deepest grip. The stars above glimmer coldly, as though they watch from a distance too great to offer pity. Inside, each soul drifts in and out of shallow, restless sleep. You lie still, your limbs heavy as iron, your breath coming in shallow, ragged pulls. Every shiver feels like a small earthquake, a reminder that your body is faltering under the endless cold. In the servants' hall, the young maids twitch and murmur in their sleep, chased by dreams of hunger and punishment. One rolls over and curls into a tighter ball, her knees drawn to her chest. Another's hand drifts across the straw mat, seeking warmth that doesn't exist. In the kitchens, the cook finally gives in to exhaustion. Her head slumps onto the soot-blackened hearth, mouth slightly open, breath rattling like wind through dry reeds. Rats dart past her feet, fearless now in the absolute stillness of the hour. Up on the battlements, the last watchman leans against the icy stone, eyelids fluttering like fragile moths. His chin drops to his chest. Somewhere in the woods beyond the walls, a wolf howls, a low, mournful sound that seeps into every crack of the castle like a curse. The lady of the castle lies rigid under her furs, eyes wide open. She counts beads that aren't there anymore, lost in the dark hours before dawn. Her mind loops through prayers, regrets, and the silent question every soul here carries. Will I see the sun again? In the chapel, the priest finally collapses beside the altar, his fingers still tangled in his rosary. The candles gutter one by one, leaving him hunched in shadow, a lone silhouette swallowed by the dark. You feel the last threads of your strength slip away. Your heart beats slower, each thud an effort. Your mind drifts into fragments of memory, warm baths, soft sheets, laughter in the kitchen. But those images feel like lies here, as unreal as fairy tales told to wide-eyed children. A single torch sputters and dies in the hallway outside. The darkness that follows is absolute, as though the castle itself has decided to close its eyes at last. You realize then with a sharp pang that the castle is not simply a building, it is a living monument to human endurance, to suffering stacked upon suffering. It demands that every person give up their warmth, their comfort, even their hope, in exchange for the briefest promise of survival. He would not survive this night, not because of a sword or a sudden illness, but because the slow, gnawing cold and the endless hunger are battles you were never meant to fight. In the quietest moment before dawn, the castle sighs, a long, low exhale that feels almost like a lullaby. And if you listen closely, it almost sounds like it's saying, "You were never meant to stay." Now, dear listener, as you lie in your warm bed, perhaps with soft blankets piled high and gentle hums from distant streets or quiet clocks, breathe deeply, feel the warmth against your skin. Let gratitude wash over you like the first morning light. You are safe. You are home. And tonight, you are alive in a world that no longer asks you to trade your soul for another sunrise. Good night, and sleep well. The first hints of dawn finally tiptoe across the sky, a pale wash of gray and pink that peeks shyly over the distant hills. The castle does not greet it with joy, but with weary resignation. The guards on the battlements rouse themselves, blinking in the new light as if it were a stranger. Their faces are slack and pale, eyes heavy with the memory of an endless night. One man tries to stretch his frozen fingers, wincing as the blood sluggishly returns. In the servants' hall, a low murmur begins, sighs, half-whispered curses, the creak of joints waking unwillingly. The young maids push themselves upright, hair matted, cheeks hollow. One girl rubs her eyes, smearing soot across her forehead like a silent war paint. In the kitchen, the cook stirs. Her eyelids flutter open and she winces at the pain in her back and legs. The first duty of the day waits, boiling water for another pot of thin gruel, scraping last night's crust from the pot's edges. The lady of the castle sits upright now, staring at the shuttered window as if it holds a secret promise. Her hair is tangled against her cheeks, her eyes red-rimmed from another sleepless night of prayers and worries that drifted into the dark unanswered. The priest emerges from the chapel, his robe dragging across the damp floor. His face is drawn and gray, as though carved from cold wax. He begins to whisper morning prayers to the empty corridors, words that hang in the air before sinking like stones into the floor. You feel it now, the heaviness of survival after a night in this stone labyrinth. Each person you see carries the same silent truth, that they did not live the night, they merely endured it. Your mind floats to your own life again, the gentle rustle of sheets, the hiss of a kettle, the tender softness of a pet curled beside you, the quiet certainty that morning means safety, comfort, and possibility. Here, morning means only that the cycle begins again. Another day of scraping, carrying, mending, kneeling, shivering. Another day of trading small pieces of yourself to keep the castle fed. As you take your final, shaky breath in this imagined night, you understand something deeper than fear. That comfort isn't just a luxury, it's a shield for the soul. Without it, every sunrise feels like another battle rather than a gift. Now, nestled in your warm bed, feel your muscles relax, your eyelids grow heavy. Let the soft world around you embrace you fully. You are safe, you are warm, you are free from the silent demands of this ancient, hungry place. Tomorrow, you can open your eyes to gentle light and soft sounds. Tonight, you can drift into dreams that do not echo with the clatter of wooden bowls or the scratch of rats in the dark. And as you slip under, remember, you did not survive the medieval castle. But you have survived your own long days, your own small wars. And tonight, that is enough. Sleep well, dear traveler of time. Good night.